Hi everyone, welcome back here to our channel and to this week's video. Now today we talk about marriages. Now when couples get married, a lot of time is spent on planning things around the wedding day and the honeymoon. And so a lot of time and planning goes into things like the music, the food, the guests, and that kind of thing. Now that's important, of course, because you want your wedding day to be special and there's nothing wrong with that. But oftentimes couples forget that getting married also has legal consequences. And it's important to understand what these legal consequences are and also if there's any options available as far as this is concerned. Now, that is exactly the purpose of today's video, guys. Now, firstly, recognize that if you do decide to get married, there's three options available for you. Firstly, you can get married in community of property. Secondly, you can get married out of community of property without the accrual system. And thirdly, you can get married out of community of property with the accrual system. Now, let's talk briefly about each. Firstly, marriage in community of property. Now, if before you get married, you did not sign something called an anti-nuptial contract, an ANC of an Afrikaans, huweliksvoorwaarde contract of a HVK, if you didn't sign something like that, then your marriage will automatically be in community of property. Now, the basic idea with a marriage in community of property is what's yours is mine and what's mine is yours. So there's no longer a separate estates. Instead, there's now one joint estate and each spouse share equally in this joint estate. Now, there's many things that flow from this notion of a joint estate, but just to mention a few obvious ones is firstly, obviously, if a spouse is financially strong, then that will have a positive influence on the joint estate and therefore the other spouse. And obviously, if a spouse is financially weak, that will have a negative impact on the joint estate and therefore on the other spouse. Another thing to keep in mind with a marriage in community of property and this joint estate is for certain types of transactions, you will require the consent of your spouse. Sometimes verbal and informal consent is enough, but for other certain types of transactions, you will require formal written consent. And I suppose the final comment to make when it comes to a marriage in community of property that with a joint estate is that if the marriage comes to an end, obviously each spouse will have a claim to half of the joint estate, whatever the joint estate looks like at that time. Now, the second option, guys, is a marriage out of community of property and without any accrual systems. Now, in order to have this apply to your marriage, you need to take the step of entering into an ANC with your spouse-to-be. Now, with this kind of marriage, the basic idea here is that each party keep their separate estates. So what's yours is yours and what's mine is mine, and it stays that way. Now, obviously, that also means that there's no consent required. Whatever you choose to do with your estate is your business. It doesn't impact the other party, at least not legally. Now, the third option that's available is a marriage out of community of property, but subject to the accrual system. Now, this one works exactly the same as the previous one. What's yours is yours, and what's mine is mine, but there's a but there. And the but is simply this notion of the accrual system. Now, how does the accrual system work, guys? The accrual system basically says that if at the end of the marriage, the one estate grew more than the other estate, then the smaller estate will have a claim to a portion of that growth. Now, let's use a practical example to illustrate that. Let's say you get married, and at the time of the marriage, each spouse's estate start at 0. But now at the end of the marriage, the one unfortunately stayed at 0, but the other one grew to 1 million. Now, the difference here is obviously 1 million. So what the accrual says is this estate is entitled to half of this growth, which will be 500,000. And that's how the accrual system works, guys. Now, guys, those are the three options available to you if you decide to get married. Now, I hope you can see why these matters are important and why they do deserve a spot on your to-do list as you are planning your wedding day and you are planning your honeymoon. I realize that it's not the easiest conversation to have, guys, but I can promise you if you and your husband or your wife-to-be do take the time to also talk and decide on these matters, in the long run, I promise you, you'll be better off for it. Guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you back here next week. Until then, take care and cheers for now.